You start seeing, these houses with these paired chimneys, and this is a CCA Christensen up on the left, and the house kind of coming into order in that old kind of long house, that was asymmetrical and had doors and windows all over. You're starting to see the door in the middle, that new kind of neoclassical idea coming into Denmark at this time. So what the explanation is, what we see is that most of the people who came and emigrated to Utah were from the peasant classes. They would not have been farmers. They would not have probably built these big houses in Denmark or known them, but they would have seen them. And when you come to a new country and you start over, and you leave behind that peasant world, you're not. I think you just have to feel. You're not going to build this stuff of your past. What they did is that they built in the Danish style, but it was what a Danish farmer would do, not a peasant, not a a bonded land. They call it corvée, someone who is bound to the land as a peasant. You wouldn't do that. You would build the house of the farmer that you work for. And that's what they did. And it's pretty fascinating, because this is just one of the first ones that I actually saw. This is one that I drew out it's in Osted, just outside of Copenhagen, built about 1871, according to the farmer. This is the Hincy House up in Holiday. It's one of the first that, I went to high school right next to it. But it's the same, it's this three-part plan. You can kind of see, here they've taken, in the Hincy House in Utah, we often take out that entrance passage because, for a number of different reasons. It's kind of a social barrier. It's that kind of space that, is a barrier between you and the outside world, so people have to come in and then they have to cool their heels for a little while in the little entrance hall. Those tend to disappear here in Utah, and we can. I've got a number of ideas that I talk about in my book about why that is. But anyway, so you can kind of start seeing these houses now kind of showing up, and there's some really great ones. This is the Jacobs from Jensen house in Ephraim, 1870. Probably a house from about the same time. So you see, it's really happening in Utah about the same time it happens in Denmark, that these new houses are starting to really penetrate the middle class and this new farming class. And so this is, it's a pretty good one here. And these are really, I don't know. I think I drew, I don't know, maybe about 43 or 44 of these here in the valley. And there are more here than anywhere else. There's some really great ones. This is the Frederick Christian Sorensen house. Frederick Christian was the first Danish convert to the Mormon Church in Copenhagen, but he was from the rural area outside there. He was a blacksmith. He came and he built, family thinks 1860s, I think probably a little bit later, probably about 1870. It's adobe that was painted to make it look like it's brick. And anyway, it's a classic three-part plan here with a rear kitchen kind of extension off the back. This is kind of a rare one that has the kind of the smaller room in the interior. Jacob Nielsen, another Dane, in Ephraim. This is what the house looked like originally. It was plastered and changed a little bit, but it's still in pretty good shape. Norwegians built them. This is the Olaf Larsen house in Ephraim. He was from Oslo, right outside of Oslo, and in the little town where he lived in, there wasn't a lot of room. There wasn't enough room to build these things kind of lengthwise, with the roof parallel to the street. So he was used to kind of turning them around so that the narrow end faced in, and so you can see, to get the full sense of his three-part house, you really have to go around to the side. That's what it looked like originally. Again, it was adobe that's been plastered and painted to make it look like brick. Brick, everybody wanted a brick house. And if you couldn't afford it. And brick really wasn't really widely available in the valley, really, to the 1880s. And so what you did is that you took your adobe house, you plastered it, and then you scored it, and then painted it to make it look like it was fired red brick. And there's still some of these around. Tells you something about the importance of fashion. Indented front porch. These I've seen in Sweden and Norway. In Sweden and Denmark. Anyway, this is the Jens Nielsen house in Ephraim. There's more of these in Ephraim than anywhere else, just because in Ephraim was little Denmark. But there's a number here in Mount Pleasant. My favorite one, which I think is anybody from Fountain Green here? No, I think this one's gone. Andrew Berenson, 1877, quite late, but it's this real beautiful brick house up on the east side of Fountain Green. Other Swedish examples. This is a house from Sweden, Uppsala, just outside Stockholm. This is a very good example of the one over in Spring City, the Peter Monson house, the Monson Larsen house that he built around 1881. You can see it's got a different kind of outside, but the interior is the same. And one of my real favorites is the Carl Uckerman house down in Ephraim. And at first we didn't know. We thought this was just Victorian, trim or jigsaw work and stuff until I started reading and looking at in various books on Norway. And my friend, when Craig and Melissa were in Norway, they took a picture for me of one of these houses. But you can see these really elaborate front porches that you see all through Norway. And again, a three-part house. It has that Parstuga plan on the inside. Construction techniques, not so much. This is sort of classic Danish construction, what we call half timbering. It's half timber and half in some type of infill of adobe or brick, or sometimes just woven willows plastered. We see very little of that here, and I think probably just because they didn't want to waste wood. There was enough adobe that they could just build basically in a masonry style here. There's one really good example over on 5th West here by the old Seeley house. It's a pretty late example of it, but it's really classic Danish construction. He must have hired a Danish a carpenter to do this work. Lots of really great Norwegian construction. This is a house that unfortunately is gone. It's Nils Peter Ostesen. He was the stonemason. He was a stone carver in Fairview. He carved a lot of the gravestones. If you go up to the Fairview graveyard, he actually signed a lot of his gravestones. But his house was right as you drive west out of Fairview. The old barn is still there, but the house was really extraordinary. It was an American plan. It was a two-room plan, but it was built in this great Norwegian construction with full half dovetail. But you can kind of see how they would groove the logs so that they fit tightly together. This is one of the best that I've ever really run across. And they tore it down and used it for firewood. I don't know that I had words with them, but it was kind of, that was when I did come close to getting shot. I don't know, the point is that what we really did start, when we started looking, when you start really studying it, instead of just driving around going, wow, that looks like an interesting building, if you stop, and draw them, start looking at them carefully, what I call archaeologically. That's really the way we study these buildings, is really approaching them as artifacts, as you would, prehistorical. Basically trying to look at them in a way and study them in a way that you can try to really understand what they're about. And you start finding all of this amazing stuff. This is an ancient, what we call a cruck, C-R-U-C-K, truss. It's an internal truss in a Danish barn down in Ephraim. This has also been torn down. Very rare in this country. It's usually, these kinds of things really fall from favor, probably in the late 18th century. And then you start seeing this in Ephraim from the 1870s or 60s or 70s. And it's like this ancient type of construction, but it had an iron bolt at the top, so it married this, kind of really like a medieval type of truss with modern technology. I don't know. There's great Norwegian construction. This is another really good Norwegian barn in Fairview, and one that got torn down in Spring City, the Jensen barn. These were two. This one is this is the Ostesen barn, and this is the Jensen barn in Spring City. And granaries. These are Swedish style, what we call a double notch. So the point is that what by looking at these objects, we're able to see, I think, early Mormon society in a very different way. And a lot of people, there's a sociologist, they have this little formula that they say that that disorder often produces order. So where you have a very sort of chaotic or very fragmented social situation, maybe like what we're going through now, is that we really demand. Sorry, I was going to try to hesitate or refrain from any kind of discussion of any of that. But chaos in some ways, demands order. Sort of an external, sort of superficial order. And that's certainly the people who have written about America generally have really talked in those terms. Is that because we value freedom in our own sort of individuality, so much, and that we are so free that we really do, right, almost from the beginning, give up a little bit of that freedom to display kind of a community through conformity. America, people like Gertrude Stein said, Americans are, they go together. So is it they go together one at a time. But the idea that so that people have argued too that we always think of this the American suburb as as these little boxes all looking the same, and people who have studied early American buildings like I have here have really concluded that that kind of uniformity is visible in really 18th century New England and Virginia. You give up some of your freedom by basically, you disguise how free we are by these kind of these, they call them the masks of orthodoxy. So we're on the outside, we're sort of conformists, we wear ties and all that kind of stuff. At the same time, on the inside, we can do whatever we want. And so what I think, and I'm hoping I'm making this clear, but one of the things that I think about Mormon society is that just the opposite, is that where you have a very orderly world, where the cosmos is figured out, is in control. You have a very tight sort of authoritarian, really kind of rigid sort of hierarchy, that you have a very orderly society, that in fact it allows a really a good amount of chaos. You don't have, at least in the 19th century, in Mormon communities, is we see a great diversity of expression. It wasn't, this lockstep, everybody dressed the same, everybody, the Danes continue to drink, beer, make beer. They have their own language really into the 20th century. It's just much more open and free than we kind of think about. And I think we tend to kind of interpret the past in this sense by what we think contemporary Mormon society might be like. And so, my work here, and really what my book has been about is trying to understand a little bit about how that kind of situation worked, where we see a really, within this kind of orderly structure of religious society, is an incredible openness. Everybody, because you were a Mormon and you were here because you'd walked all the way from, God knows where, Iowa, or whatever, that was enough. Man, if you'd walked here, you didn't have to, build a house like everybody else. You were just part of the group. And you could do really almost anything. And we see it with furniture. I'll just go, because I'm really interested and I don't want to, take too long and talk too much about all this stuff. But it's really fun to look at, these kinds of things that we see that, these early pioneers doing, that really they really brought their old world with them. We see these lounges, these double lounges in Denmark. This is in Denmark. This one this is not from Sanpete, but we saw there are a number of them like this from Sanpete. And I tend to draw these like I do like I do my buildings, So you can kind of see here how it works. They call them a double lounge because you have a bed that kind of pulls out from. Has anybody seen these? As you kind of, there's still a lot of this stuff around in Sanpete, so keep your eyes open. It's pretty great. These empire, wardrobes, again, these newer kind of fashions in furniture were just like the neoclassicism in architecture. In furniture, it was what we call the empire style with these curved drawers and very elaborate cornices and so forth. And so this is from Denmark on the left, and the one is from Sanpete. It originally had one of these little crowns on it. This is one of my favorites. It was built by Emil Sandstrom, who was a cabinet maker over in Spring City. It's a beautiful cabinet. It's very typical of the kinds of things we see being built in Sweden at the same time in the 19th century, particularly with this little backsplash, this little, you can see there's this really nice little, I don't know how to do this. If I touch this, I'd probably be, I was told not to touch a particular button or something would detonate, But if you can see, anyway, there's an extra shelf at the top, and anyway, these are really classic type of cabinetry that we'd see in Sweden. Sandstrom was a Swede. Of this wonderful hanging bookcase from Ephraim, in Denmark, particularly in the mid, early 19th century. I mean, this would have been real typical to have these kind of hanging pieces of furniture, bookcases, other everything. They hang everything on the wall. And this is a really, really wonderful piece. Originally, it's pine that's been painted to make it look like mahogany, a really fine, very expensive wood. Cradles. This is Denmark on the left, Ephraim on the right. I mean, these kinds of things. I know they're simple, but this is this kind of transfer of these kinds of objects. Uh-oh, that one didn't want to come. It's my favorite one. These empire, again, these are becoming popular in Copenhagen and at the time of immigration, and they're called Boston rockers, but they're really Windsor rockers, and they're found all over. Pinstoles, Windsor chairs. These are all, the one on the left is Copenhagen at the National Museum. These are all examples from Sanpete. And then you get real crazy kind of inventions. If you ever see one of these, we call them spindle cupboards, but if you ever see one, they're really, I don't know that we've found them all. At one time, I think I've photographed or drawn about 30 of these from Sanpete, and it's the only place you're going to see them. They weren't made in any other part of Utah, and they're these china cupboards, and they have spindle, they would turn it on a lathe, kind of turn it, and then, well, first they'd split it, and then they'd glue it back together, and then they would turn it to make it, to give it all these little curves and vases and whatever, and urns and stuff. And then they'd split it, and then they would glue it onto the front of these. And I thought for sure I'd find that these were Danish, but they're not. They were a kind of popular type of architecture. It was, a furniture called cottage furniture that was popular in a lot of the magazines at the time. And if somebody in St. Pete saw these and must have said, "Wow, that's pretty cool," And they started making them. And this one, it comes from Spring City, and Sandstrom, we think, might have been the maker. A lot of them come from Ephraim. They tend to be more standardized in Ephraim, and that guy Carl Uckerman was a cabinet maker down in Ephraim, and he in the 1870 and 1880 census, he shows up as having about 10 to 15 turners and joiners working for him. So he's got a little factory going, and I think a lot of his stuff, anyway, and he worked in this particular form. We call them, anyway, they're just sandpeat spindle cupboards, and this is one I drew. This is one, anyway, that came out of a house in Spring City. We found it at the dump. Yeah, the guy was taking it up to the dump to just to get rid of it. But one of the things that is really Danish about them is that these little curved spoon racks. If you see at the top, and I think you can see it if I can go back, you can see the spoon rack at the. Those are found in almost all pieces of Danish built-in furniture. And they would put their silver up there so they could, it's a sign of wealth. So if you see these, make sure you don't take them to the dump. Barrels, this is a Danish barrel, willow barrels, things like that. I know that it's sort of a primitive technology, but we see them here. This is one from Ephraim. And baskets. On the left is Denmark, these woven, willow baskets. So it's an amazing legacy, and I want you to think, if you don't take anything else away from it, but this idea of order allowing disorder, or disorder requiring order. It's an interesting little theoretical conceptualization. I think it's not a bad way to think about things, because I think the more fragmented, some people, I've even said, like their own relationships, is if you have a really strong relationship, with your children or whatever, your partner, you allow certain, people can get away with a lot more than if things are just kind of on the edge and stuff, then you kind of demand a little bit more, I don't know, precision or something, in the kind of behavior. And I think that's one of the things that I think that I've learned, I think, from St. more than anything else, is that particularly in the 19th century, the sense that they were all here together, excuse me, and working together towards this idea of Zion, allowed them, really a tremendous ability, I think, a freedom of sort of individual behavior. And we certainly see that in all aspects of the material culture. It's a good place, I think, to start looking. For people say, don't listen to what we say, look at what we do. And that's what, I, as a historian, I'd rather look at what people do than what they say they're doing. And it's been really a wonderful journey. So anyway, I've got one more, book that's coming out on St. Pete. All of my drawings of about 150 houses and whatever. I'm hoping to have that out by the summer. And then, of course, my life's work, which is really what this talk is really all about. But it's a larger kind of study of the material world that the Mormons made, and I use St. but it's really about the whole Mormon West. But I use St. as basically as a representative example because it's a really good one. And I think if you really want to know about this world that preceded the one, certainly, that we live in now, this is a great place to do it. Anyway, thank you very much.